Nice to see you all. And thank you for coming. Thank you, Meg, and the Women's Club, and Mary Angela as well, for St. Kate being part of that, and Kate Megan and others who are part of this group and this effort, making it happen so that people come together to take time out to think and see and hopefully socialize a little differently. What's different about the socializing here is that it's often done with a glass of wine in your hands, I see. And I like that. It makes you a very warm audience. But I did come back from Berkeley this weekend, where it was a lot of fun. It was an honor to be on the stage alongside other notables from around the world. And it was not so fun, if I'm honest, to come back to snow and cold, and I know that nobody else is enjoying that very much either. But those are things that I had not anticipated, not a part of the plan, right? Happens every day. All kinds of things that come up that aren't a part of the plan. I had to jostle all kinds of phone calls today because so-and-so was late and another one was early, and that's what happens. In a larger sense, I had to navigate quite a lot of change personally to stand before you tonight as a futurist. As a futurist, what I do is I work with people and organizations to understand those conditions, how they change, what accounts for their change, so that we can actually think in advance about who we are, where we're going, and how we're going to make a plan to kind of keep that as true and aligned with the realities as they shift around us. Makes us more effective, more successful, and gives us something to aim towards, rooted in analysis and creative play. That's what I do with organizations. So, as the subtitle of my book suggests, how I parse it out is it's really important to know what changes. Conditions change all the time. What doesn't change? That's what guides you and pulls you into the future. What doesn't change are, I'm just going to give this to you a little bit up front, 4 universal forces that govern our world, and they are resources, the raw materials in our environment, energy, sunlight, land, water, and so forth. As they change, society shifts. Technology, the tools that we use to extract value from those resources and make new products. Demographics, who's there, who's a part of our group. And then finally, governance, how we cooperate and start to put things together for people to be a team and make the most that we can from resources, technology, and demographics through the rule of law and markets. Those 4 forces are what I use as a futurist to help organizations understand what's coming their way. Projected onto that is, who are you? What do you care about? What makes you unique? What is that vision that you have of the future? And then what we can do is we can go project it into 10 years from now, 5 years now. What is it that you are wondering about? And create and imagine a future worth going for. That's what strategy looks like. Innovation is how you make it come to pass. So, how you choose to catalyze change in your own life is really the point. Who you are and where you're going. And that's really the theme and the thread of my talk today, illustrated from my own experience in finding out how conditions shifted, but that there is something that's steady within myself. When people ask, how do you get to be a futurist? I can tell you that it was not a box that I checked when I was asked as a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Wasn't even on the list. Didn't know any, and as Meg say, the Association of Professional Futurists is pretty small. and as futurists like it, they like it that way. There are only a few that are allowed. I found my way to the life that I live now, and I'm sure that it's the same for you. What I have found in thinking about this, in thinking about how I arrived here, is that, in fact, the work that I do with organizations, the principles and the universals of change, how we navigate the unknown, applies equally to individuals. So I want to share that with you because that is what we will hold on to, that which doesn't change, and we navigate the future. This poem by William Stafford really illustrates. There is a thread that you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what things you are pursuing, and you have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and grow old, but nothing you can do to stop time's unfolding. But you don't ever let go of that thread. That thread, through a series of reinventions in my own life, has been what I have held on to as has taken me from dancer to chiropractor and finally futurist. And what I have found is that there is a framework in each one of those reinventions, and that it looks like, you begin with a dream. And a dream may not be articulate, but you feel it. You feel it as a desire that pulls you forward. It pulls you towards something. And it is often where we create from that kind of inchoate sense of I must, I'm interested, I'm compelled. And as you follow that thread, you make discoveries. And the discoveries reveal new possibilities, and we experience it as a moment of awe. A new way of seeing the world and our place in it, in which more is revealed. The beautiful and important thing about discoveries is that you can't make them unless you are moving. You only get them through experience and by doing something that you've never done before. That's how discoveries are made. At some point in my experience, tension comes into the picture. Dreams begin to feel like they don't fit anymore, that there is a tension, something like it's expiring. Or there's a new part perhaps related to the discovery that has you growing in a new direction. You're saying, and it feels like frustration. It might feel like resentment. It might feel all kinds of things, but what you know is that it doesn't feel right. And ultimately what you have to do is you have to reckon with it. You have to wrestle to the ground and ask yourself some very important questions. What am I going to do now? What am I going to do about what the fit that is not there? Is it me? Is it them? Or is it time to make a change? In my experience, it really is about going back to a center of who am I? What is it that I know about myself that I'm really the steward of? And where am I going? And I don't always wait to figure it out entirely because you can't know. It comes through discovery, but enough to move forward. For me, that first dream, that first nudge, that first pull came when I was 5 years old. And my good friend and neighbor Elise and her older sister, as I watched them go after school to ballet class every day with their tightly wound buns and black leotards, and I just thought, I am so attracted to that. There was just this beauty and quiet seriousness that I related to. And so I did. I went to Madame Ferrar's ballet studio, put on my pink tights and black leotard and the shoes, and also wore my hair in a bun, and I began plying then and all the way through my life for the next 25 years. There was something about that draw that I would never have, certainly at 5 years old, been able to articulate, but it was a truth that came to be realized. I had a talent for dance. For me, it was in particular a way of just, I loved kind of lying on the last note and its last gasp until the next one came up to catch me. It was a beautiful thing, and I think that it gave me a part of myself that I'm not sure I could have really encountered or known any other way. I also learned from dance a rigor and a discipline that comes out of going back to the bar every morning. No matter what happens, you could have a bad review, you could have a bad performance, you could have an injury, and you still go back and you do it again. And when you are creating work, you go back and you ask the question and you wrestle with it and you work it out, and that it takes time to unfold, but that the journey is never finished. I'm very, very grateful to my training in dance and in the arts for teaching me patience and longevity and discipline, because I think it's really helped me a lot, particularly when we look at strategy innovation now. I went on to dance with the Omaha Ballet, then cut off my hair and threw away my pointe shoes and moved on to a couple of modern dance companies. But along the way, I began to feel a kind of a different pull. It was like an itch, like I'm just curious about the world, and I love dancing, but it wasn't quite enough. So I went to the University of Illinois, and there, getting my BFA, I had to take an anatomy class. And this anatomy class was legend. It took pre-med students and it made them change majors. And I thought, how am I, a dancer who hates math and science, going to make it through? And yet I had no choice. But the discovery that I made was that something extraordinary was available to me as I peered into cadavers. And I began to see a beauty about the design of the body that I found extraordinary. That I began to understand that as there were like little nubs of nerves coming out of the neck and kind of braiding themselves in these beautiful 5 nerves that allow me to do this or this or, you know, that. I understood where it came from. And having that knowledge made me a better dancer. It made me a better teacher. And it also awakened me as a way of seeing self-related to systems as a whole and to nature and to science and the universe. I mean, it was just an extraordinary thing. It awakened in me the sense of mystery that I had always been engaged with. I followed my way onto a position with a company in Chicago. This was a great company. We toured a lot. And even so, I had to keep teaching ballet. I taught dance kinesiology at Columbia College, and I even had to do what most dancers and artists do, was wait tables. And as I was doing that, my dream was becoming fulfilled, the dream that I had had when I was so young of, I am going to dance. That's all I ever wanted to do. Part of that dream had included, a lifestyle. I thought, I'm going to tour the world, and I'm going to sit at Parisian cafes and hang out with cool musician types. And somehow it wasn't feeling quite like that. I was crabby. I was catty. I was going, why did she get that part? And I knew that that was not really, certainly the best of who I was. And I had to kind of take myself by the scruff and say, Sommers, what are you doing? What is going on? What is really the problem? Is this something where if I moved to New York, as people have been asking me to do, and went to a new company, would I be happier? And I recognized that, in fact, this was not situational. That my kind of frustration, that tension, was really more conditional. Because I knew that when I was happiest, when I was my best self, was when I was learning. When I was a part of creating something new and discovering it. And that was something that I had certainly discovered while studying anatomy, and that I loved teaching. So I thought, what I do best, where I am happiest, is when I am following my own mind, and that part of what dance does not allow for is that. Dance rewards you for being a good follower, and that is something I had to confess I was not. Much better when I am engaged and pursuing and inquiring. So I made the decision to remove the pressure from my career. I wanted to dance, but I knew that if I was going to pursue it as a career that I wasn't going to be happy. So why not become a chiropractor? Which is what I then went back to get high school level chemistry and high school level algebra together for, along with the other prerequisites, so that I could finally move here to Minneapolis and go to chiropractic school to become a doctor. In that, I had another dream. That dream was, I thought, in this pursuit, my mind, how could it ever tire? It will feed me endlessly. That I knew was important. I thought it will give me enough financial room to keep dancing the way that I want to, and I would still finally find myself traveling Europe and doing all of that. That was my dream. And the discoveries I went were several. One was that there were so many different ways of understanding health, so many different ways of understanding disease. Western medicine was one. I studied Chinese medicine, I studied homeopathy. I took it with me and I began to really form a point of view about what health and healing look like. And I was teaching my way throughout. Teaching has always been a theme and a thread for me, and putting together seminars and workshops. A key discovery for me in that was in parsing it together as I was talking with people who would come in and say, well, the doctor said that can't be so. Or I have been, a naturopath said that I'm full of toxins, and if I, could only do that, then somehow I'm going to be relieved and purified and it will all be well. I began this seminar series by saying, here's the deal, is that every one of these disciplines is a system of logic. Every one of them is entertaining the same two questions. What is health? And what is disease? And depending on their worldviews, they came up with different systems to answer them. And that my job as a doctor was to be literate in different systems so that I could see things through a number of different lenses, see those systems in place, understand that none of them was the total answer, and find a good place to start. Find a pathway for moving forward, using as much as was at my disposal. The real key here is that I was really bumping into people who had very strong philosophies about the way it is, right, wrong, black, and white. And I found that it is much more complex than that, and it is in the complexity where truth lies. That science itself really asks us to inquire and to have an open mind and not to have answers ahead of time. I loved that. I call that a best question. What is health? What is disease? Rather than having the answers. That is now wisdom that I carry with me in my work now. The other discovery that I made as a chiropractor was that I loved business. I created a clinic. There were 5 practitioners. It was downtown in a converted loft space. I added an art gallery because that was part of who I am. It was successful. I did well. I was busy. I couldn't have been any busier unless I changed the business model. I bought a clinic and integrated it, and in the end, as I was teaching and teaching and teaching throughout, I began to feel a little tension. Believe it or not, when I thought that this would kind of keep my mind engaged for a long time, I was beginning to feel a little bored. But more importantly, the other tension that was happening for me personally was that I was feeling ready for family. And I was looking for a way to keep the business moving, to do my teaching and consulting as that was growing. And lo and behold, as I was at a conference in Germany, I met a man. And he thought I was everything. And I said, who, me? I thought he was everything. He was a musician and an editor of a journal and a homeopath. And it was the dream. It was the dream. It wasn't going to be Parisian cafes. It turns out it was going to be German cafes. I thought I could accept that. I thought I was finally going to have everything. So the reckoning at that moment was, now what do? I have just invested and created this big business that is doing well, and yet the pull was, I think I'm going to go for it. I was going to be able to dance again. I was going to write finally. I was going to be able to practice, and I was going to tour Europe in a new way. And so I sold my clinic, packed up my belongings, and went to Germany. And it wasn't too long after that that I discovered that that dream was not a fit. The relationship wasn't a fit. And with that recognition, I went, here I am. I don't have language. I don't have a job. I don't have family. I don't have friends. But what I did have was this voice inside me that was just rising louder and louder, going, no. And it cut through the things that were keeping me up with insomnia, with, if I just, if we just, all of that noise about trying to make it different. All of the knots in my stomach. And all I heard was, no. And I became aware, without anything else but that voice, that maybe it's that simple. Maybe it's that it doesn't fit. Maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe there's nothing wrong with him. Maybe there's nothing wrong with this situation. Maybe it just doesn't fit. Maybe I can relax my mind and let it go and do what needs to be done, which is to honor, no, I cannot do this. And took another big risk, which was to leave all of that behind and start over. What I knew from that is that the simplest thing that I could follow is that when I feel in a good place, when things are really on, there's no noise, there's no tension. I don't have to question a thing. And that what there is to pay attention to are those moments, those people, those experiences, those places where it works. There's no argument. And that my job in life is to collect thumbs up. And I did that when I came back, and I came back to Minneapolis by saying, what do I know? What do I like? Where do I do well? And teaching and consulting was definitely it. What I know really well when I look at business and strategy is that the rigor and the iterative process that I'd learned as a dancer really is needed. And that there is a place for problem solving that makes really good use of that. What I also knew was that often businesses were all doing a lot of this and a lot of this, and running to meetings is what that looks like. Having circular discussion is what that looks like. Not making decisions is what that looks like. Because they weren't really asking themselves good questions. The best question. That there are systems of logic that you have to step back from and say, so what's really going on here? What's the big picture? And as I teased that out, I began to work myself into work that was really refined in the ways that I had always been living from. Who are you and where are you going? And the where are you going work expanded into what's the biggest context? Being the kind of practical science geek that I am, deconstructing how things work really appeals to me, and developing those four forces, a model for understanding what society looks like, that we are in fact functioning as economic units, that we come together to produce more together than we can by ourselves, and that we do so with resources and what's available. We do so by the tools and technologies that we invent and create. We do so by taking note of who's around and how well that's going to lead us into the future. So the distribution of gender and age and ethnicity and skills and all that really matters. And then we make plans We make plans by making rules of cooperation, rules of law, and rules of the market as what much well is that valuable. That if we understand that as a unit of economy, a unit of change, the human agency piece, and the four forces that do not change, we can begin to see emerging signals of what's coming next and how we will organize for the future. That's the work that I do now. Excuse me, I got lost. And I did it by holding onto that thread, by listening and following a pull, by following the thumbs up. And that as I have begun to deconstruct what that looks like for any body, a body being a person, a body being an organization, a community, or larger, is that who you are and where you're going is what really needs to stay front and center. But that you will not be able to figure it out in advance. And that is where most of us get stuck, is we want to know. I know I'm ready for change, but if I could just figure out what's coming next, then I can move. But remember, discovery only happens in the doing. So how do you know? You follow your thumbs up. You say to yourself things like that person, like that color, like that environment, like that exchange. Depending on whether you're trying to solve a business problem or a personal problem, you say like that. When it arises, take note. And it begins to take form over time. The form is not determined first. But you collect the content and see the form start to shape around it, which is how I got to be a futurist. For a while, I was kind of going, am I a brand strategist? I don't know. Am I an innovation specialist? I don't know. It's felt like that book, Are You My Mother? Are you my mother? No, I'm not your mother, said the bulldozer. I'm a futurist. Now, is that really what I am? I don't know. It's the best. It's the best description of what I do, because what I do is problem solve for the long term. It is the best fit. But it is the internal fit that makes the most sense, no matter what it is that you call it. And the way that you find your way there, through thumbs up. And you listen and collect and you move, the phrase these days is you lean into it, right? Because the truth is we can never be born enough. And this is an E.E. Cummings phrase that is quite beautiful. We can never be born enough. What do you want to be when you grow up? It assumes that there is a place to get to. It assumes that it's finally going to be done and there's going to be a big ta-da. What I've learned is that, in fact, it never ends. It never, ever, ever ends. And you have to stay engaged the whole time in order to have a life worth living. The practice of it really comes as you practice for yourself every day. These aren't qualities that you wait to have cultivated first and then you move. You practice courage. Wherever you can, every day. When you are stuck, practice curiosity. Go, why is it like that? I wonder. Like from a really pure place of I wonder. And get curious about it. And optimism is a practice as well. It is where you find your agency to take action and move forward. To reinvent from that place. To listen. It is all, I believe, all of life is a practice. You're never done. If you were to say then, as you're looking for your dream, like that, pay attention to your like that's, to your thumbs ups, and that most importantly, and I think this is a big takeaway, is that when things don't fit, they just simply don't fit. There is nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with the world. There's nothing wrong with society. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with him, her, them. There is nothing wrong. It is up to you to choose. If it's not working, choose. That's the only power to really affect change that you have, are the incremental choices that you make, moving towards where you're going. Finally, the last piece of practicing, and I'm sorry, this is these were supposed to be hidden. Because in the practicing, in the listening, in the leaning, in the thumbs up and the like that, what you are really doing is you are just every day putting your oar in the water and rowing. And rowing and rowing. Gently. Gently down that stream that has its own current. You don't know where it's going to take it. You don't know what's around that bend. I know it could be a beaver dam. It might be something, a waterfall that takes you over. Or it might be an oasis that you could never have imagined. But your job is to keep rowing. And to do it merrily. Because what else would you do? What else could you do? But to embrace that effort and that ability to be present, to do it merrily, merrily. Because what you have to row into is a dream. Life is truly but a dream. It lives within you, and what you do with it each day is how you continue to move who you are towards a future worth choosing each day. So, you get from me a thumbs up. The thumbs up monitor is a really important one. Don't argue with it. Know that when it's not here, all it means is it's not there. Anytime that it starts to go right, you have decisions to make. That's all it is it tells you I have a choice to make. Nothing wrong with me, nothing wrong out there. I just know it's not that. And to keep practicing your courage, optimism, and curiosity each day. So I leave you with the invitation to keep putting your oar in the water and row. And thank you for having me here with you tonight. Thank you.
Cecily, some questions, if you have anything about getting into this mindset of a futurist for yourself personally, or maybe for the organizations or companies you're working with. But I also want you to know that she is taking your business card, if that's easiest thing for you, to drop it in a little bowl out on the table, right behind the big mirror here. Just drop your business card in the bowl if you want to get her book. But she didn't bring any with her tonight.
Yeah, I don't, so let me just clarify that. I don't walk around with carts selling books. I don't keep any inventory, and yet there is interest, and I really, honestly, deeply appreciate that. So what I would like to do is, if we have a little square device, we can take your order, and if you'd like to do that, I can send it to you signed, so that if you would like a direct book from me. Otherwise, it's available wherever books are sold. And I invite you and your friends and family and organizations to order lots of them.
That's a great book.
It's a great, yes.
I'll start with the question.
Yeah.
So, if I was to apply, and I don't even know if I can exactly apply what you shared tonight to running a business, if you don't feel the tension, which is what lot later that the tension happens when everything else has already changed around us. So how do we even, this think like a futurist, what is it we have to see that maybe there is going to be tension to be smart enough about all these other steps you're mentioning are going to come?
I will answer that in a couple of ways. So let me answer that with regard to relationships, because that's a big one. One of the things that I learned when I was running my clinic is that, when things start not to be a fit, guess what? It shows up as resentment, frustration, or, slacking off or whatever. And I thought, well, that's not what I'm really intending at all. In fact, we came here because we really liked one another and we had a common vision. So now I understand something. What I began to do from that point forward was to say, we are in this relationship because we are coming together to do something. And while it works, we are so for each other. But I understand that every relationship has an endpoint. There are very few that don't. So let's actually engineer that into our expectations from the beginning, which is to say, I am going to be for you always. And when those feelings start to arise, just again, notice them for what they are, and that it might be time to move on. And I will help you in whatever way that I can. And similarly, I will also kind of reserve that right and that you do the same by having a co-commitment to me of leave me whole, is what I called it. Let's leave each other whole, that you don't leave a hole behind and work to fill your position and so forth and do the training, but that we were always going to be, that's really what I was out for. So that's, I think, a little bit of a tip about relationships. Set them up with the end in mind. That framework in general, I think, fits onto other partnerships and opportunities, is that things do expire. There are very few companies that have been around very long, right? Things expire. So start with the end in mind. Start in terms of worst case and best case scenarios, and start to think through what some of those junctures might be where you might say, well, if I came into a situation where we, took off and suddenly our business was for sale, how would I want to think that through? If, on the other hand, it went the other direction, you might do that. Now, I think what you were asking really has to do more with how market conditions change, right? Probably. That has to do with, one of the things that I like to say about being a futurist is that functionally, we're zoomologists, which means that you have to, on a regular basis, stand back and get that wide view and take a look at how things are coming together so that you can see yourself in that picture and understand it, again, from as much of a systems point of view as possible, and say, what I'm really out for now is our business model designed to do that? What are some of the opportunities? Where should we be moving? What should we be dropping? And then you have to zoom all the way in and get the particulars of what does it feel like, and engineer all of that for success. That's what innovation looks like. You have to get really up close and personal and step back. So you want to bake that into how you run your business. And most of the time we're here just trying to, with a long snorkel, trying to keep our heads above water and keep the air coming in, right? So what you have to do, and that's as it should be, there's nothing to change about that. We live in worlds and businesses about producing, so you have to keep producing. But you do also have to structure in times and systems and methods to step back and look. So those are very general ways of answering that question. You'll see in my book that I call it the 5% rule. 5% time and budget of every project gets allocated to some stepping forward. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you know the difference between the tension that you're talking about and a bump in the road? That things are just kind of not going well. What is the difference between now I need a change or now I just need to?
The way I experience it is that, that's how I feel. What does it do to me? again, does the bump in the road look like something like, ooh, didn't expect that? Well, I'm going to have to now accommodate. Not happy about it, but within me, I actually am able to adapt and accommodate, and it's okay. But if I start to feel like I am getting crabby and catty, then, or whatever that mixture might look like, I think that's how you know. And sometimes you just need time to figure it out. But again, most of the stuff lives in a very kind of inchoate, inarticulate form. And for me, it's, if I'm working too hard at it, I'm working too hard at it. It's not that hard. It's really that simple. It's not working. So I may not have all the information, but I need to pay attention. I need to pay attention about what's not working and why. And again, and just start to collect some of the data before I can make a choice. Is that satisfying at all? Yeah, I really think it has to do with, are you okay? Is yourself okay? Because conditions are sometimes rough, right? Often rough. But if you are essentially whole in the midst of difficult circumstances, then you're okay. But if you're starting to not be whole, and you're starting to actually lose sight of yourself and that thread, that will tell you. If you're losing a lot of sleep, if you're doing all of that stuff on a chronic level, that will tell you. Anyone else? Yeah.
This is a complete sort of non sequitur. You made reference earlier to the square thing. Some people may not know what you're talking about in regards to being able to get your mark, so you might want to explain that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I'm hoping it works. I have, if you have we have a payment system that I can use on my phone, essentially. So that if you want a book, then what we will do is we will order it, and then I will send it off to you. I think that's how it's going to work. Otherwise, we'll figure it out. Otherwise, just order it from Amazon, and we can meet and I can sign it another time. But unfortunately, I don't have anything to sign for you tonight. Yeah.
This meaty lighter one, how was it to be on the stage at TED, and when are we going to see it?
Oh, well, I wish I knew when you're going to see it. I did a TED Talk in December, and it's still not up. So post-production time with that is always in question. But what a nice question, so thank you. It was lovely. I mean, it's a great stage. It was probably akin to something between Northrop and Ted Mann here on the University of Berkeley. So as a former performer, I love a big stage. 1,200 people that were there, and it was really a lot of fun. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that 5% idea?
Yeah.
Giving back, I kind of think of it as, or I encourage people where I work to spend that time in reflection. And that's such a hard sell these days.
It's a hard sell for a number of reasons. One is that people are looking for, you got to give them more than the encouragement. They need something to do. So it's in my book. The process by which all of this occurs is something that I call the zone of discovery, whereby you define what is the situation, the problem that you're really trying to solve for, what are the best questions, bring it into a place of discovery, which discovery can only happen through experience, and so workshops and field trips and interviews and all of that kind of immersion that awakens the brain to think in new ways is really, really critical, so that you can bubble up the insights to go, oh, now I see it. Now we can start creating about different kinds of solutions. And then finally, the last stage is to distill it down into what are the projects that we see in that, and how do you reverse it, engineer it into really plans that fit within a quarterly system that take you from here and current realities to what that big vision is. That process, the zone of discovery, is, I like to say, it is educable. Anybody can think like a futurist. And as long as it is widgetizable, as long as it fits into people's workflows, it can stick and scale. Because otherwise it's just ideas and wishes for people, please collaborate. We want to hear your ideas. We really love innovation around here, which is kind of how it lives a lot of the time. But the 5% rule, provided that there is a framework and a method, says, all right, on every project, 5% of your time and budget is already set aside to engage in zone of discovery activities, probably at the beginning of a project. For sure, as you're going, you're going to find and my rule of, I would say thumb, but 2 fingers, is that if you find yourself in a meeting and you're talking about the same thing for the second meeting, it's the wrong tool for the job. Language and conference rooms are actually, they're very limited tools. In my view, they're best for updates. But if you're really trying to problem solve, if you're stuck, and you are always stuck in a project at any given time, you need to go engage in the right questions and ways of thinking to resolve it so then you can get back into execution. And you've already have that time budgeted to do that. So rather than just kind of think big thoughts, you got to build it into the workflow. So that's what 5% looks, and 5% ideally begins all the way up in the boardroom with 5% of profits into long-term investment. But it is a rule of thumb that can be applied for how do we manage big thinking and creative projects. And most companies are asking that question now within an environment that asks us to execute according to very short-term goals. And guess what? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that way of working. It's just that you have to design for the system as it is in order for change to unfold. So in my view, this is not about, we have to create a culture of innovation. No, the culture is a byproduct of actually doing it. But what you have to do is you have to widgetize it, or else it doesn't stick. And companies do every year invest millions upon millions of dollars and man hours into the next big thing, or blue chip consultancy to come in and bring in design thinking or whatever the latest might be. But it goes away because guess what? People are really busy. And that's the truth. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you're not going to change it. So you have to work with it. So that's my very long-winded answer to how do you do that. You have to give it some structure. That's really what I'm saying, to give it some structure and reward it. Yeah.
Cecily, you used a key word that I didn't see in your process, and I'm sitting here thinking that the zen of all this is kind of like the Wizard of Oz. It's kind of like you're going down this yellow brick road because you're looking for the answers, you're looking for how to get home, and we have to talk about someplace between discovery and tension what the fear factors are. Everybody wants change, but they don't want it for them. They want other people to change. I mean, that's what I see in business. I deal with companies in transition all the time. Well, yeah, I want to make some changes, but not really. Or I want to be innovative, but that costs money. Or I want to come up with a different way of doing something, or expanding, from distribution to product development, but they don't realize that the people who are doing distribution are a different gene pool than the people who do product development. And so you've got, it's a risk-benefit ratio here that doesn't underestimate the courage needed to do this, in my mind.
Yeah. And
So talk a little bit about being bold and being unafraid to do what we did when we were little kids and go down the yellow brick road and run into all kinds of barriers and challenges and experience.
I think it's awfully hard. I mean, I think that's
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to say. It's
okay.
hard.
Well, but I think what you're hoping for may not be possible. That it isn't, because most business environments really are not open to big and bold and let's just try things. That's the truth. So you design for that. My experience is that while there are I mean, really smart, gifted, big-spirited people who want to do a lot of things, and they may even invent projects that have that objective. That when it comes to implementation, that, and again, in my book, people read this, that in my phrase is that you do it to tolerance. To tolerance is my phrase, is that, so you can only really create change to the tolerance of the system, to the people, to whatever, and that whatever gets done is really great. And it's not everything all at once. And that sometimes it's very, very, very small increments, but that you have to really deal with what's in front of you, the truth of what's in front of you, and allow that to, so you create the big vision, but by the time you come back to it, another phrase of mine is to find the first movable piece. You don't do everything all at once. You find that thing that you can do right now. You find the thing that has a little bit of agreement. You might, and that requires, not too much risk either. And then you build on it. So, because I think that is it's a vicious cycle which you're describing, because there is a desire to be big and bold, but in fact, it's too much. It's asking too much. Because really what the brain needs and what our systems needs is, how do I do this piece? If you give me the how, I'll get active. So that it isn't just an invitation to be bold, it is people need, and businesses particularly need, the how piece. Tell me how. So the how is you engineer it. You have to get really, 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 really specific. It's not enough just to wish for things to let's go forth and be creative. It doesn't work like that. Now, it might work like that in a workshop environment, where again, the exercises have to be specific to know what you're asking for in terms of how wide people go. But in terms of actually functioning in an organization, it doesn't work like that. So you go into the zone of discovery so that you can do that big work, and then chunk it down and reverse engineer it and engineer it to fit the system as it is, to tolerance with a first movable piece. And then people go, oh, I can do this. And guess what? You've got people rowing with you. And then you've got enough people rowing with you that you're getting agreement and things are beginning to turn a corner. So I really do think it's a lot in the how, more than in, it's all important. It's all important. But I would say that I'm a little surprised to find myself in my work these days completely committed and focused to that, because of course the work that I really do is the front end piece. I do the big forecasts and strategy and creative work. And yet none of it matters if you can't get it in. So I'm just to my core committed about, as an innovator, that's the problem to solve for. So, I've done a lot of work towards that end of solving for that. Because, you all, every day, in different ways, whether it be TED Talks or conferences or evening meetings like this, are finding inspiration. And it calls to you, like that, you might say, right? It calls to you. But then you go back into an environment, you go, where does this live? How do I bring this to life for myself? Well, you want to get specific. And let the specificity of those moves be informed by, sometimes it's not an articulate or defined vision, but it's enough of a pull, and you keep moving. And as you do it, guess what? You will be gathering information and experiences that bring more definition to that. Now I see it. It's called a futurist. That's what I get. People ask me, how did you get to be in? And when I'm being kind of tongue-in-cheek about it, it's like I made it up. And what I mean by that is that I felt my way into it. I worked my way into a position and gained the background and the experience and the skills and tools by following what I do best and where my interests lie, and creating products and services that were specific to what I just knew something was there. So I think it's important to be grand. But I think it's also important to not allow it, because as soon as you get grand, you're going to feel overwhelmed, and you might even feel something even worse popping up, which is shame. And that will drain you of all intent. You know, it's really, because how can, you know, if there's no how, it's very hard to live with that. And that's why people stay buried in tasks, because at least they can get that done. But if the task list is aligned with the vision, then at least your busyness is built, you know, as I like to say, if you're not busy building a future, then you're just busy. So, which is why you have to step back. What are we doing? How does it work? What's worth going for? And then you have to go get busy. 95% of the time is in execution. And you can't argue with it. That's just the way it is. 5%. Zoom in. The zoom.
I think that's a good way to end. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Again, everybody is invited to go upstairs and have some treats and some beverages.